When my daughter-in-law told me to leave, I smiled instead of crying. I do not know why I smiled. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was shock. Or maybe it was because I had already cried all the tears a mother can cry many years ago. She did not shout. She did not slam the door. She simply stood in the kitchen, her hands resting on the counter, and said in a quiet voice, "Ma, it might be better if you stay somewhere else for a while."
For a while.
Those words felt soft, but they were heavy. I looked at the window behind her. The evening light was fading. The house smelled of rice and cumin. My grandson's small shoes were near the door. It was my home too. Or at least I thought it was. I raised my son alone in a small rented room with peeling paint and a leaking roof. I stitched clothes at night. I skipped meals. I walked in the rain to pay his school fees. I told him stories when he was sick. I held his hand on his first day of school. And now I was being asked to leave. Old age is something else entirely. When you are young and tired, you believe one day you will rest. When you are old and tired, you realize rest is not always peaceful. That evening, I folded my shawl neatly. I placed my teacup in the sink. I packed only 2 saris and my medicine. I told her, "It's all right. I understand." But inside, I whispered to myself, "I do not understand at all." Soft piano music begins. Fade into memory. I was 23 when my husband passed away. He was not sick for long. Just a sudden fever. A hospital visit. A night of waiting. And then silence. My son was only 4 years old. His name is Arif. He had his father's eyes. Big and hopeful. When the neighbors came to our house and whispered in low voices, he did not understand. He kept asking, "When will Baba wake up?" I had no answer. The days after that felt like walking through fog. I remember holding Arif close at night. I remember staring at the ceiling, wondering how I would survive. There was no big family to support us. My parents were gone. My husband's relatives helped for a few weeks. Then life moved on for them. But for me, life had just begun again in a different way. Scene shift, small rented room, early morning light. I started sewing clothes for people in the neighborhood. Blouses, school uniforms, simple curtains. My fingers would ache. My eyes would burn at night. But when Arif slept beside me, I felt strong. Sometimes he would wake up and say, "Ma, are you not sleeping?" I would smile and say, "Soon." I wanted him to study. I wanted him to become someone who did not have to count coins before buying vegetables. We lived in a single room. One bed. One stove. One window that looked at another wall. But that room held dreams bigger than any house. Arif was a gentle child. He never asked for toys. When other children had new shoes, he would look at his own and say, "These are fine, Ma." He grew fast. Children always do. There were days when I felt tired beyond words. Days when customers delayed payment. Days when the landlord knocked on the door. But every time I felt like giving up, Arif would run to me after school and hug me tightly. "Ma, I got full marks." That hug was my salary. Years passed like this. He finished school. He went to college with a scholarship. I still remember the day he wore his first formal shirt for an interview. He looked so grown up. He touched my feet before leaving. "Pray for me, Ma." I placed my hand on his head and said, "You are my prayer."
He got the job.
The day he brought his first salary home, he placed the envelope in my hands. "For you," he said. I did not open it. I just cried quietly. Those were good years.
Simple.
Peaceful. When he told me he wanted to marry, I was happy. Truly happy. Her name was Nyla. She was educated. She spoke softly. She had dreams of her own. When I met her for the first time, she served tea with a shy smile. "Assalamu alaikum, Auntie," she said. I corrected her gently. "Call me Ma." She smiled. I believed then that my life was complete. Wedding scene, warm lights, gentle music, laughter. After the wedding, they asked me to move in with them. Arif said, "Ma, you have struggled enough. Now it is your time to rest."
Rest.
I believed him. The first few months were calm. Nyla tried to adjust. I tried to give space. I woke up early to prepare breakfast. I folded clothes. I cleaned the kitchen before she returned from work. She had a job too. A good one. She was busy. Sometimes I would wait with tea in the evening. "How was your day?" I would ask. She would nod. "Tiring." I understood. But slowly, small things began to change. One day she said, "Ma, you don't have to cook every day. I can manage."
Her tone was polite.
But I felt something else under it. A distance. So I stepped back. Another day, she rearranged the kitchen shelves. I could not find the spices. When I asked, she sighed lightly. "It's more organized this way." I felt like a guest in my own routine. There were no big fights. Just small silences. At dinner, Arif would speak about work. Nyla would respond. I would listen. Sometimes I try to share a memory. Arif used to hate vegetables as a child. I would laugh. Nyla would smile faintly. Arif would look uncomfortable. "Ma, that was long ago," he would say. I began to speak less. Rain outside the window. Soft thunder. The day my grandson was born, my heart felt young again. Holding him in my arms was like holding time itself. Small fingers. Warm breath. I helped with everything. I stayed awake at night so they could sleep. I massaged Nyla's feet when she was tired. But motherhood had changed since my time. One evening she said gently, "Ma, the doctor said we should not give him that oil massage." I nodded. "Of course." Another day she said, "Please don't feed him sweets." I nodded again. I wanted to help, but it seemed like everything I knew was old. Arif was busier now. Promotions. Late nights. When I tried to talk to him alone, he would say, "Ma, I am tired. We will talk later." Later rarely came. There were moments when I heard whispers from their room. My name spoken softly. "I feel watched all the time," Nyla once said. "I know," Arif replied. "But she is my mother." I pretended not to hear. My world became smaller. My room. My prayer mat. The balcony where I watched people pass by. I told myself this is normal. Every generation is different. But loneliness has a quiet sound. It echoes in the chest. One afternoon, Nyla came home early. She looked stressed. She sat across from me and said, "Ma, can we talk?" My hands felt cold. "Yes, Beta." She took a deep breath. "I feel like I have no space. I respect you, but I need my own way of running my house." My house. The words were not cruel. They were honest. I swallowed my pride. "I never wanted to take your place," I said softly. She looked away. "I know. But still." That night, I did not sleep. The real breaking point came on a quiet Sunday. Arif was home. The baby was playing on the floor. I was in the kitchen making tea. I heard Nyla say, "We cannot continue like this." My heart began to beat faster. Arif's voice was low. "What do you want me to do?" There was a long silence. Then she said, "Maybe Ma can stay with your aunt for some time. Just until things settle." For some time. I stood still, holding the teacups. Arif did not answer immediately. That silence hurt more than any word. Finally, he said, "Let me talk to her." I walked into the living room before he could come to me. "I heard," I said calmly. They both looked shocked. Nyla looked guilty. Arif looked confused. "Ma, it's not like that," he began. I raised my hand gently. "It's all right." The baby laughed, unaware. I looked at my son, the boy I once carried on my hip, the boy who cried when I left him at school. "Do you think this is best?" I asked him. He looked down. "I just want peace, Ma."
Peace. I smiled then.
The same smile I gave when I left my own father's house as a bride. The same smile I gave when I signed hospital papers alone. "Then it is settled," I said. That evening, I packed quietly. Arif came to my room. "Ma, this is temporary." I nodded. He held my hand. "You know I love you." "I know," I replied. But love and presence are not always the same. When I stepped outside with my small bag, the sky was dark. A neighbor watched from across the street. I kept my head high. Inside, something had broken softly. I moved to my distant cousin's house in another part of the city. It was smaller, simpler. At first, I felt ashamed. I told people I wanted a change of environment. But at night, I would stare at the ceiling and wonder where I had gone wrong. Did I speak too much? Did I care too much? Did I stay too long? Weeks passed. Arif called sometimes. "How are you, Ma?" "I am fine," I would say. He visited once with the baby. The child had grown. He did not recognize my face immediately. That hurt more than anything. I realized something slowly. I had built my whole identity around being needed. When I was no longer needed in the same way, I felt useless. But maybe motherhood is not about being needed forever. Maybe it is about letting go with grace. I began to spend time with other women in the neighborhood. Widows, retired teachers, women with stories like mine. We shared tea. We shared memories. One of them said, "Children do not stop loving us. They just start loving their own lives more." That sentence stayed with me. I stopped waiting by the phone. I started sewing again. Not for money, but for joy. I stitched small dresses for poor children nearby. I felt useful again. Months later, Arif came alone. He looked tired. "Ma, can we talk?" We sat quietly. "I made mistakes," he said. "I should have handled things better." I listened. Nyla felt overwhelmed. "I felt stuck between you both." I nodded. "I never wanted you to feel unwanted." I placed my hand on his. "I know, Beta. Forgiveness is not loud. It is quiet." He asked me to come back. I thought. "I will visit," I said. "But I will keep my own space." He looked surprised. Then relieved. Sometimes love needs distance to breathe. Ending. Now I live in a small rented flat of my own. It has one bedroom. One window that opens to the sky. In the evening, I sit there with a cup of tea. Arif visits with his family. Nyla greets me warmly. Time has softened us all. I no longer try to run her kitchen. She no longer feels watched. My grandson runs into my arms. "Dottie," he shouts. And that is enough. I raised my son alone. But old age taught me something new. Love is not control. Sacrifice is not ownership. And children are not our retirement plan.
They're souls who walk with us for some time.
When the time comes, we must let them walk ahead. I do not regret raising my son. I do not regret loving deeply. If I could live again, I would still choose him. But this time, I would also choose myself. Soft piano music rises. Fade out on an old woman by a window, peaceful, not lonely. Because sometimes, being alone is different from being abandoned. And old age is something else entirely. After I moved into my little rented flat, the first thing I noticed was the quiet. Not the painful kind. Just wide quiet. No pressure cooker whistle. No television from the living room. No footsteps running down the hallway. At first, the silence felt heavy. Then slowly, it began to feel honest. I placed my small wooden table near the window. I put my prayer mat in the corner. I arranged my medicines neatly in a tin box. This space was mine. No one would rearrange my kitchen shelves here. No one would sigh if I folded towels differently. It sounds like a small thing. But for an old woman, small things carry weight. Soft sunlight, dust particles in the air, a cup of tea steaming near the window. The first week, Arif called every day. "Ma, did you eat?" "Yes." "Are you taking your medicine?" "Yes." "Do you need anything?"
No, Beta.
I could hear the guilt in his voice. It made me uncomfortable. So after some time, I told him gently, "Call when you can. I am all right." He grew quieter after that. And I let him. Because love should not feel like duty. There were nights when I remembered the small rented room from years ago. Back then, I had nothing.
No savings.
No security. But I had purpose. Now I had security. A little pension. A roof. But purpose had to be rebuilt. Old age is strange that way. When you are young, people need you. When you are old, people appreciate you from a distance. That I used to worry about Arif's fever when he was small. I remember one night he was burning with temperature. I stayed awake pressing a wet cloth to his forehead. Ma, he whispered weakly, don't go. I am here, I told him. I was always there. That is what mothers do. We stand guard while the world sleeps. Now I was learning something new. Sometimes we must stand guard for ourselves. Community park. Elderly women sitting on benches. One afternoon, my neighbor Farzana knocked on my door. You sit alone too much, she said. Come to the park. I hesitated. I was not used to going out for myself. But I went. There were 5 other women there. All different ages. All carrying invisible histories. One had 3 sons abroad who rarely visited. One lived with her daughter, but felt unwanted. One never married and cared for her parents until they passed. We did not complain loudly. We simply spoke softly. And that was enough.
I realized something that day.
I was not the only one who had given her whole life to others. And I was not the only one learning how to live again that I began sewing again. Not because I needed money, but because my hands remembered how to create. I stitched little frocks for children in the nearby slum area. I donated blankets in winter. When I handed a small girl a dress, she smiled wide. That smile warmed me in a way nothing else had for months. Maybe motherhood does not end. Maybe it simply changes direction. Evening. Call to prayer, echoing faintly. Window open. One evening, Nyla called. Her voice was softer than before. Ma, how are you? I am well, Beta. She was silent for a moment. Then she said something unexpected. I did not understand before. I did not respond immediately. She continued. I felt like I was competing. But I was not. I was just insecure.
Her honesty surprised me.
I was young too once, I said gently. I also wanted my own space. She sighed. I never meant to hurt you. I know. And I truly did. Because pain is not always caused by cruelty. Sometimes it comes from fear. Months passed. Arif started visiting more regularly. But something had changed inside me. I no longer waited for him to knock. If he came, I was happy. If he did not, I was still steady. That steadiness, it gave me dignity. Slow pan across small apartment. Sewing machine. Teacup. Window curtain moving gently. Soft piano music continues. One Sunday, Arif came with my grandson. The little boy ran into my flat like it was an adventure. Dottie, you live here? He asked. Yes, I laughed. This is Dottie's castle. He explored every corner. He opened drawers. He looked out the window. Children do not see small spaces. They see magic. He climbed into my lap. You don't live with us, he said simply.
No, Iraplia.
But I am always near.
He seemed satisfied with that.
Children accept truth more easily than adults. After they left that day, I did not feel the same emptiness as before. I felt balance. For years, my identity was only Arif's mother. Then it became the mother-in-law. Now I was simply me, a woman who survived, a woman who loved deeply, a woman who was learning to rest without bitterness. Old age is not only about weak knees and medicine schedules. It is about watching the world move forward without needing you at the center. And that can hurt, but it can also heal. Because when you step away from the center, you finally see the full circle, night sky. Single lamp glowing inside window. One night, I took out an old photograph. It was from Arif's graduation day. He was smiling proudly. I was standing behind him. I looked tired in that picture, but strong. I touched the edge of the photo. I realized something important. I did not lose my son. I simply completed my job. A mother's work is not to be held forever. It is to prepare. And I prepared him well. A few weeks later, Arif brought Nyla with him again. This time, she stayed longer. We cooked together. Not as rivals. Not as strangers. Just 2 women sharing a kitchen. She asked, Ma, how do you make your lentils taste so warm? I smiled. Time, I said. You let them simmer slowly. She laughed. Maybe that is what families need too. We both understood the meaning that I do not know what the future holds. I may grow weaker. I may need help one day. And that thought still scares me sometimes. But I no longer fear being unwanted, because I learned something important. When you build your entire world around one person, you shrink when they move away. But when you keep a small piece of yourself alive, you never truly disappear.
Soft piano rises.
Fade to black old age does not knock loudly. It does not announce itself with drama. It comes quietly, first in the knees, then in the back, then in the way you sit down more slowly than before. I began to notice it on an ordinary Tuesday. I was standing near the stove, stirring lentils, when my hand trembled slightly. Just a small shake. Almost nothing. I told myself it was weakness from not eating enough. But later that week, I forgot where I placed my glasses. Then I forgot if I had taken my medicine. These are small things. But small things feel big when you live alone. Close-up of medicine strip on table.
Clock ticking softly.
I did not tell Arif at first. I did not want to worry him. He already carried so much work, pressure, home responsibilities, fatherhood. I did not want to become another burden. That word, burden, it follows old people like a shadow, even when no one says it aloud. One evening, while walking back from the park, I felt dizzy. The world tilted for a second. I held onto a gate until it passed. Farzana saw me and rushed over. "You look pale," she said. "I am fine," I replied automatically. But I was not fine. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. For the first time, fear entered my heart. Not fear of death. Fear of dependence. When Arif was small, he depended on me for everything.
Food. Clothes.
Homework. Comfort. I never felt tired of it. Love made the weight light. Now the thought of depending on him made my chest tighten. Would he feel the same lightness? Or would he feel pressure? These thoughts are not kind, but they are honest. Farzana insisted on taking me to the doctor. After some tests, the doctor said gently, "Your blood pressure is unstable, and you are a little anemic." He looked at me carefully. "You should not live completely alone." I smiled politely. "I manage well." He did not argue, but his eyes said something else. When Arif found out, because Farzana told him, he came immediately. His face looked worried. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. I shrugged softly. "It was nothing." "It is not nothing, Ma." His voice was not angry. It was afraid. That fear in his eyes. I had seen it before. The night his father passed away. The night he thought he would lose me too. We sat quietly in my small flat. He looked around, at the medicine, at the simple bed, at the thin curtains. "I don't like you being alone here," he said. There it was. The same circle again. I had left so they could have peace. Now he wanted me back, so he could have peace. Life moves in circles like that. "I will manage," I told him gently. He shook his head. "You managed your whole life. Let me manage now." Those words touched me. But I was cautious. "I don't want to disturb your home." "You are not a disturbance," he said firmly. For a moment, he was my little boy again, stubborn, protective. But a few days later, Nyla visited alone. She brought fruit and homemade soup. We sat across from each other quietly. Then she said something that surprised me. I was afraid before. "Of what?" I asked softly. She looked down. "Of not being enough. Of being compared. Of losing control of my own home." Her honesty felt raw. "And now?" I asked. "Now I am afraid of something else," she said. "Of what?" "Of my son growing up and pushing me away one day." We both went silent. Because that fear, every mother carries it, no matter how modern or educated. She reached for my hand. "We need to learn how to live together without competing." Her fingers were warm. In that moment, I did not see her as my daughter-in-law. I saw her as a woman trying to balance love and fear, just like I once did. After many conversations, we decided something new. I would not move back permanently, but I would stay with them during the week and return to my flat on weekends. It was an unusual arrangement, but it gave everyone space. And space, I learned, can protect love. The first night I stayed again in their house, I felt strange. My old room had been turned into a study. They prepared the guest room for me. Guest room. The word did not hurt this time, because I understood something now.
Homes change. Rooms change.
But relationships can grow if we let them. 2 months later, something happened that tested us again. It was late evening. The baby, now almost 4, was running in the hallway. I was walking slowly behind him. My foot caught the edge of the rug. I fell. Not dramatically, but hard enough. Pain shot through my hip. The room spun. Arif rushed forward.
Ma.
I tried to smile. I am fine. But I was not fine. The hospital visit confirmed it. A small fracture. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to limit movement. Enough to require care. And suddenly, the fear I had been hiding became real. I needed help. Bathing. Walking. Even standing up. Naila adjusted her work schedule. Arif took leave. They both cared for me gently.
No sais. No irritasyon.
Just quiet attention. One night, as Naila helped me sit up, she said softly, "You did this for your son once." I looked at her. "And now we do it for you." Tears filled my eyes. Not from pain. From relief. Dependence feels heavy when you imagine it. But when it is wrapped in love, it feels different. I realized something important during those weeks. I had assumed my presence was a burden. But maybe my absence had created distance too. Sometimes we protect others so much that we do not allow them to grow. Arif needed to learn how to care for me, just as I once learned how to care for him. Night lamp glowing. Arif adjusting blanket over his mother. One night, Arif sat beside my bed. "Ma," he said quietly, "when Abba died, I was scared you would leave me too." I listened. "I worked hard all these years because I wanted to protect you. But somewhere, I forgot how to balance everyone." I placed my hand on his. "You did not forget," I said. "You were learning." He smiled faintly. "We are still learning." "Yes," I agreed. "We always will." Healing takes time. So does understanding. As my hip slowly recovered, something else healed too. The invisible tension. The unspoken fears. Old age is not only about weakness. Sometimes it is about allowing others to become strong for you. And that is not defeat. It is trust. Soft morning light. Birds outside the window. A kettle begins to boil. Healing is not loud. My hip grew stronger week by week. I could walk without holding the wall. I could sit down without wincing. I could stand in the kitchen again. But something inside me had shifted. Falling had humbled me. Not in a painful way. In a truthful way. I had always been the strong one. The steady one. The one who did not need help. Now I had seen myself fragile. And strangely, I was not ashamed anymore. Breakfast table. 3 cups of tea. Quiet morning. During my recovery, I stayed mostly at Arif's house. Naila adjusted her routine without complaint. She would say, "Ma, sit. I will do it." At first, those words made me uncomfortable. Now they felt warm. One afternoon, while folding small clothes together, she said softly, "You know, when I first married, I thought I had to prove myself every day." I listened. I thought if I was not perfect, I would lose respect. I smiled gently. "Perfection is a heavy bag to carry." She laughed quietly. "And you?" she asked. "Did you feel that way?" I thought for a moment. I did not have time to think about perfection. I was just surviving. We both sat in silence after that. Different generations. Different fears. But the same heart. I began noticing something new. When I stopped trying to guide everything, things still moved forward. The house did not collapse if I did not wake first. The child did not fall sick if I did not supervise every meal. The world did not depend on my constant attention. This realization felt strange. For so long, my identity was built on being necessary. Now I was learning to be present without controlling. That is harder than it sounds. Afternoon sunlight on old photo album. One evening, I took out old photographs again. Arif as a baby. Arif at school. Arif at his wedding. And then I noticed something. In every photo, I was slightly behind him. Not at the center. Just behind. Supporting. That is where mothers stand. Behind. But somewhere along the way, I forgot to step further back when the time came. Not because I wanted power, but because letting go feels like disappearing. A month later, Arif came home excited. "Ma, I have news." He looked proud, the way he did when he first got his job. "I've been offered a position in another city." The room went quiet. It was a good opportunity.
Higher salary.
Better future for the child. Nyla looked hopeful but nervous. "What do you think?" Arif asked me. He still asked. That alone mattered. I felt something tighten in my chest. Another city. Another move. Another change. For a second, fear tried to speak. If they move, will I be left behind again? But I did not let fear answer. Instead, I asked softly, "Is it good for you?" He nodded. "Very good." "Then you should go." Nyla looked at me carefully. "And you?" she asked. I smiled. "I have learned how to live." Packing boxes. Newspaper wrapping dishes. Child running around excited. The house filled with cardboard boxes. The sound of tape sealing edges. The child asking, "Are we going on a long trip?" I helped fold clothes slowly. Not because I had to, but because it felt right. One evening, Arif came to sit beside me. "Ma, come with us," he said quietly. The offer was sincere. He meant it. And that made the decision harder. That I looked around the living room. The sofa, where we had argued softly. The dining table, where silence once lived. The hallway where I had fallen. This house held our healing. But it was not my home anymore. Not fully. I had my own small flat. My own window. My own rhythm. "I will visit," I said gently. "But I will stay here." He looked surprised. "Are you sure?" "Yes." He searched my face. "You won't be lonely?" I smiled. Loneliness is not about distance. It is about disconnection. And we are no longer disconnected. His eyes filled slightly. He nodded. Later that night, Nyla came to my room. "I was worried you would feel abandoned again," she admitted. I shook my head. "This time is different."
How?
"Because this time, it is not fear pushing me away. It is choice." She sat beside me. "You are stronger than I realize." I laughed softly.
No.
"I am just older." Moving truck outside. Morning sunlight. Suitcases at door. The day they left, I stood near the gate. My grandson hugged me.
Tightly.
"Dottie, you come soon." "I will," I promised. Arif touched my feet. That small gesture, it carried years inside it. Nyla hugged me gently. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" I asked. "For teaching me without forcing me." I watched the car disappear down the street. This time, I did not feel pushed out. I felt released. There is a difference between sacrifice and surrender. Sacrifice is given with strength. Surrender is given with defeat. For a long time, I confused the two. When I left their house the first time, I felt defeated. Now I felt steady. I had not lost my place in their lives. I had simply changed its shape. Returning to my small flat felt different now. It no longer felt like exile. It felt like home. I placed fresh flowers near the window. I opened all the curtains. Light filled the room. Old age had taught me something important. Letting go is not the same as being left behind. Sometimes, letting go is how we stay connected without suffocating each other. One evening, I sat by my window as the sun set. The sky turned soft orange. I whispered to myself, "You did well." Not perfectly, not without mistakes, but with love. And sometimes, that is enough.
Soft piano rises gently.
Camera lingers on her silhouette against the evening sky. A week passed after Arif and his family moved to the new city. The house across the street looked the same. The tea still boiled at 6 in the morning. The vegetable seller still called out his prices. But my days felt wider. Not empty, just wide. I no longer measured time by their schedule. I measured it by sunlight, by prayer, by the slow simmer of lentils on the stove. Old age gives you time. sometimes too much of it. And when you have time, memories come knocking one afternoon. I opened a box I had not touched in years. Inside were old letters from my husband. He used to write small notes when he traveled for work. Simple things. Take care of your health. Kiss air for me. I will bring sweets when I return. He never returned from that last hospital visit. For years, I did not allow myself to grieve fully. There was no time. A child needed food. Fees needed paying. Life needed managing. I became strong because I had to. But strength sometimes hides pain. And pain does not disappear just because we ignore it. I sat there holding those letters. And I asked myself something I had never asked before. Did I raise my son out of love? Or out of fear of being alone? The question was not easy. I loved him deeply. That was true. But I also held him tightly. Too tightly at times. When he married, maybe I felt not just protective, but threatened. Threatened by change. Threatened by losing my role. I had blamed Nyla silently in my heart. But maybe the problem was not her. Maybe it was my own fear of becoming invisible. That realization hurt. But it also felt freeing. Forgiveness is not always about others. Sometimes it is about looking at yourself honestly and saying, I was doing my best with what I knew. I was a young widow. I was scared. I poured my whole identity into being a mother. And when that identity shifted, I panicked. That does not make me a bad person. It makes me human. That I remembered one night from long ago. Arif was 10 years old. He had a school trip the next day. He was excited. But I was anxious. What if he falls? What if he gets sick? I had thought. I almost did not let him go. But he looked at me with those hopeful eyes. Ma, please. Everyone is going. I let him go. And he returned smiling, full of stories. That was the first time I loosened my grip. Marriage was simply a bigger version of that trip. And I had not handled it as calmly. A few days later, Nyla called. Her voice sounded tired. The new house is still a mess, she said. Boxes everywhere. I smiled. You will arrange it slowly. She hesitated. Ma, can I ask you something? Of course. When you were my age, did you ever feel like you were failing? I did not answer immediately. Then, I said softly, every day. She laughed weakly. Really? Yes. But children do not need perfect mothers. They need steady ones. There was silence on the line. Then she whispered, thank you. In that moment, I felt something settle inside me. Not superiority. Not control. Just connection. I began volunteering twice a week at a small community center. We stitched blankets for hospitals. We read stories to children whose parents worked long hours. I watched young mothers rushing in and out. Tired. Distracted. Trying their best. And I saw myself in them. Life does not become easier with time. It only changes shape. One afternoon, a young woman snapped at her child loudly. Then she looked embarrassed. I gently touched her arm and said, it is all right. We all get tired. She looked at me with watery eyes. No one says that, she whispered. I realized then how much kindness older women can offer, if we choose softness instead of pride. 3 months later, Arif and his family came to visit. The child ran into my flat like before. But this time he looked around and said, Dottie, this is your house. It smells nice. I laughed. It smells like old books and spices. It smells like you, he said. Those simple words filled the room with warmth. That evening, we all sat together. No tensión. No hidden discomfort. Just stories. At one point, Arif looked at me and said, Ma, I am grateful you let me make my own mistakes. I smiled softly. I made mine too. He nodded. Yes. But you never stopped loving me. I felt tears rise. Love does not end when we step back. It simply changes its distance. That night, after they slept, I sat by the window again. The sky was clear. Stars faint but visible. I spoke quietly to my late husband in my heart. I think we did all right, I said. Not perfect. But all right. I realized I had carried guilt for years. Guilt for not being enough. Guilt for feeling jealous. Guilt for wanting to be needed. But guilt is heavy. And old age is not meant for carrying heavy bags. It is meant for setting them down. I forgave myself that night. For the fear. For the pride. For the silent anger. For the nights I cried alone without explaining. I was not cruel. I was simply human. And human hearts take time to adjust. Old age is not only about loss. It is about clarity. You begin to see which battles were unnecessary, which words could have been softer, which fears were louder than reality. And you realize, most of life was not about winning or losing. It was about learning. It happened on an ordinary evening. Nothing dramatic. No hospital rooms.
No arguments. No tears.
Just a simple question from a small child. My grandson was sitting on the floor of my flat, drawing with colored pencils. Arif and Nyla were in the kitchen making tea. I was folding a small towel. He looked up at me suddenly and asked, "Dottie, were you scared when Abba was little and you were alone?" Children ask questions without knowing how deep they go. I paused. "Yes," I said honestly. "I was scared many times." He tilted his head. "Then why didn't you give him to someone else?" The room went very quiet inside my heart. I smiled gently. Because love does not run away when it is scared. He seemed to think about that. Then he went back to coloring. But I did not. Soft focus. Evening light fading. After they left that night, I kept thinking about his question. Why didn't I give up? Why didn't I choose an easier path? I was young. I had no money. No strong support. I could have remarried quickly and let someone else take responsibility. Many people advised it. You cannot raise a boy alone, they had said. But I did. Not because I was brave, but because every time I looked at Arif's face, I saw trust. And trust is powerful. Old age changes how you see your past. When you are young, you see struggle. When you are older, you see meaning. I used to remember those early years with pain. Now I remember them with quiet pride. Not pride in sacrifice. Pride in consistent. I stayed. Day after day. Year after year. That staying, that is what shaped him. I remembered sitting under a dim light, stitching late at night. My back hurting. My eyes burning. Arif sleeping beside me, one hand resting near my knee. Sometimes I would look at him and whisper, "You will not struggle like this." I did not know how I would make it happen, but I believed. Belief is a strange fuel. It keeps you moving even when logic says stop. A few weeks after that visit, my grandson called me himself. On speakerphone. "Dottie," he said proudly, "I told my teacher my Dottie raised my papa alone." My heart tightened. "What did your teacher say?" I asked. "She said you are strong." I smiled. Strength. It used to mean surviving storms alone. Now it means allowing others to stand beside you. Years later, when Nyla felt insecure, when Arif felt torn, when I felt unwanted, I forgot something important. The same strength that raised him was still inside me. I was not fragile. I was simply adjusting. Old age does not erase who you were. It just asks you to use your strength differently. I realized something that evening. My real work as a mother was never about control. It was about example. Arif learned resilience because he saw it daily. He learned responsibility because I showed it. And now he was teaching his own son the same things in his own way. Not my way.
His way.
And that is how it should be. On their next visit, I watched Arif help his son with homework. Patient.
Calm.
Not distracted. And I thought, he did not become this man by accident. He became this because someone once stayed up late sewing school uniforms. Because someone once walked in the rain to pay fees. Because someone once swallowed her pride to protect peace. And that someone was me. Not perfectly. But faithfully. Few months later, Arif visited alone. We sat quietly. He looked thoughtful. "Ma," he said, "I worry about when you grow older." I laughed softly. "I am already older." He smiled faintly.
You
Know what I mean?
I did.
He was afraid of losing me, just as I had once been afraid of losing him. Listen to me, I said gently. You gave me a good life in my old age, not because you bought me things, but because you respected me. He looked at me carefully. And I am not afraid anymore. Of what? He asked. Of being alone. Because I finally understood something. Being alone is not the same as being unloved. And I was deeply loved. That night, after they slept, I stood by the window again. It has become my place of thinking. The sky was clear. I whispered softly. I did enough. Those words felt new. For many years, I believed I had to do more.
Be more. Give more.
Now I understood something gentle. Enough is enough. Old age is something else entirely. It is not just weaker bones. Not just slower steps. It is the season where you see your life from a distance. You see the mistakes without hatred. You see the sacrifices without bitterness. You see your children not as possessions, but as people. And you begin to bless them without holding them. Soft piano rises gently. Morning light fills the small flat. She opens the window. Fresh air enters. On the table sits a framed photograph. A young widow holding her little boy. Next to it, a recent photo. 3 generations smiling together. She picks up her tea.
Takes a slow sip.
And whispers, if I could live again, I would still choose him.
Pause.
But this time, I would also choose myself sooner. The camera slowly pulls back. The window remains open. Light continues to enter. Raise your children with love. But do not build your whole identity around being needed. Teach them strength. Then trust that strength. Because one day, when your steps slow down, what will remain is not control. It will be connection. And connection, when built with patience and grace, does not fade with age.